I want to know, what kind of experience were you hoping to create for readers who, when you set out to write this book, you were like, okay, this is what we haven't seen before, and this is what I want to provide to readers?
Yeah. So a few things. I definitely wanted to provide science-backed information because we live in a world of misinformation, and we as women and as a culture are still living under the shadow of a big study that came out in 2002 that basically spread misinformation about hormone therapy when it comes to menopause. But broadly speaking, I wanted to build community and a sense of empowerment around aging, because while I agree with you that we are talking about it more and more and it's less taboo and nothing to be ashamed of, I still got birthday cards that said, oh, 40, yikes.
Right.
And I felt like, well, actually, I'm excited to be 40. And it really is such a privilege to be healthy and to be here. So I really want women to feel empowered and not scared of getting older.
Yeah. I also love that you have a unique background when it comes to, and you list so many incredible resources in your book, which I love. And also you have such a unique background when it comes to talking about this subject. So can you tell people a little bit more about you, your professional background, and how that sort of led to this being the subject matter that you're really leaning into?
Sure. So I am a licensed clinical social worker in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Florida. And I also have a decade of experience in the legal world. I was a practicing immigration attorney. I worked in legal or law firms in personnel roles. And my background as a mental health professional and an advocate really, I think, sets the tone of the book. Because women's mental health, women's reproductive health is a wide range of topics, and I didn't know much about menopause and midlife. And when I started learning more, I realized that it was just a continuation of what I had always been passionate about, right? Women's bodily autonomy, women's ability to make choices for themselves and their healthcare, and women coming together to get the healthcare that they deserve.
Yeah, it struck me that so many of the people that you see talking about menopause, perimenopause right now, there's incredible journalists like Tamsin Fadels is one person that I follow religiously, and she's done an incredible job with her work. And then there's doctors. Mm-hmm. And I love that your background, I almost imagine that it allows you to see the areas of opportunity and the sort of blind spots that we've had as a culture when it comes to not just, reproductive health, but women, gender, different demographics. Can you talk about, people need to read your book and buy your book, but can you give a little overview of why now, what is going on, and what is unique about sort of this generation, not only how we are coming into perimenopause and menopause, but some of the barriers that we're facing and also like the way that we talk about it now?
Yeah, I think the way that we talk about anything as millennials is really unique. I think that we as an age group have made talking about mental health struggles more normalized. We talk about motherhood struggles. And from a professional standpoint, I specialize in perinatal mental health. I work primarily, until recently, with women in their 20s and 30s, navigating issues like dating, fertility, reproductive health in the perinatal period, postpartum. And it occurred to me that I didn't know anything about what happens next. And not everyone wants to or can become a mom, but every woman goes through menopause. And so once I started learning about it, I realized not only was it important for our physical health, but so important also for our mental health. And I was really struck by the fact that as a mental health clinician, no one was talking about it, no one learning about it. And I really like that I can bring awareness to my clients, my colleagues, and keep spreading the word about what we need to know and how we can feel better.
It's interesting that we are a generation that we talk so openly about so many things, mental health being very at the top of that list. And also, you just said, you're like, I didn't know about what was coming up next. And still, menopause and perimenopause is viewed as such a taboo topic still. So, why do you think that is? Why is it so taboo when at the same time we are so open about talking about so many things?
To boil it down into one word, I would say misogyny. I think,
Yes.
the answer to a lot of our problems.
Yeah.
I think that people don't value, our culture does not value women. We certainly don't value older people. We definitely don't value older women. And we have really put an emphasis on women's value as mothers or baby makers. And with menopause, your fertility ends by definition. You're not as youthful by definition, right? Usually. And people tend to fear that for whatever reason. And I do think that the women who came ahead of us, who are in the Gen X, like the Tamsons and all the amazing women that I interviewed in my book, they are blowing the lid on this topic. But I do think that there's a lot more room for conversation about these issues. And I talk about it all the time with my kids. It's just part of our health, our body, our development. And I think that we all should be talking about it all.
Yeah. Can you tell the story about your dog that you share in the book, speaking of talking to your kids?
I told my kids that I was writing a book about women's health and about menopause. They said, "What's menopause?" At the time, they were about 5 and 8. And I explained it was like when you go through puberty as a teenager, it's sort of the reverse and you stop getting a period and you're usually in your 40s or 50s. And they said, okay, they were kind of, they thought it was cool, but that was that because it's such a normal conversation in our households. And literally the next day, our dog was a puppy and she got her period. And I was really excited because at the time I had an IUD and I hadn't gotten my own period. So my kids didn't really know what that was. And I'm like, look at the dog.
A teachable moment. Yeah.
It was one of those things that I'll never forget. And obviously I'm obsessed with my dog. So it was fun to bring her up in the book.
Yeah. And you said that I think it was maybe your daughter who, maybe it was later, she described it as a natural thing. It's just what happened because of the dog experience, right?
Exactly. Yes. She said to her friend, because the dog wore a little diaper with a pad inside. And my daughter had a friend over and she said, "Oh, our doggie's wearing a diaper with her pad. Don't worry. She's okay. It's her period. It's just part of her body." And I think that language is how we need to approach all of this.
Yeah, that's incredible. And how amazing, like what a wonderful moment that she will, I'm sure, reflect upon when, she gets her period and as she gets older. And that's something that I think that while we do have more body literacy and more of a conversation around these things, like you said, it is sort of the generations that are right before us that are breaking the stigma, if you will. And so it's incredible to think of, I'm guessing they're Gen Alpha, yes?
Yes.
Ish, or like end of Gen Alpha, and then whatever generation comes next.
They say beta, but that has a negative connotation. But my kids, I believe, are squarely Gen Alpha, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, and it's really incredible to think that generation might think of it as, just something that happens, as simple as, most people when they're 16, they get a driver's license. Like,
or you lose your baby teeth, right?
Or you lose your baby teeth.
That a lot. It's just something that happens. It happens at different ages for everyone in slightly different ways, but it's a real part of human development.
I love the baby teeth analogy. And that's something that I feel like people who are listening to this right now, that will be an unlock for them because we're so neutral about our baby teeth. It's not like, oh my gosh, that means I'm old now. And it's something that just happens. And that is even exciting for kids sometimes when it happens, if you are a kid who gets excited about those things, because it means that your life is starting to unfold. I love that so much.
Oh, good. Yeah, it's a rite of passage. It could and maybe should be celebrated.
Yeah. I talked to someone a few episodes ago on the podcast. Her name is Alana Jacqueline. She wrote a book called Medical Gaslighting. And she's a patient advocate. And she talks about how to go into doctors' offices and really advocate for yourself. And she has chronic illnesses. I think that your specialty with reproductive health, not to point out like what might be happening, that like this bad thing and this bad thing and this bad thing, but just so people can start to be aware, because whether they're going through it already or they're about to go through it and they don't know it, there's a lot of people who, like, perimenopause is on the horizon. What are some things to look out for when it comes to going into your OBGYN, like sort of green flags, red flags? Not to be so binary about it, but just so people can have more of an awareness.
Great question. And I will say that I don't think doctors or other healthcare providers are intentionally gaslighting us for the most part. I think everyone is well-intentioned until proven otherwise. But the reality is that medical providers have not been taught about menopause. There's very little funding in women's health in general. And so it's just this black hole of knowledge. And so what we end up with is a lot of dismissal from healthcare providers. So a red flag would be, well, you're too young to worry about it. Or if you still get a period, you can't be experiencing perimenopause. Or there's nothing that we can do about it. A green flag, the greenest of the green flags, would be, which the Menopause Society recommends, is for providers to start having conversations with women at age 35 regarding perimenopause. Just opening the door to the dialogue, explaining what it is, how we might treat certain symptoms, etc. Just inviting a conversation. And the next layer of green would be for the provider to listen and to even say, I'm not sure, but I'll look into it. Or let me refer you to a colleague who knows more, or I'm going to research it. Because again, they don't have that training, but it's out there. Guidelines, etc., are available, and you need and deserve a provider who will listen to you and collaborate with you.
Yeah, and they're out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not everybody, but they are out there. It's easy to say, oh, it's all doctors, it's the doctor's fault. And also, like you say in the book, the amount of research that has been funded for this and for women's health in general, it's pretty minimal. Like, it's pretty bleak. And also, in the last few years, there has been funding. There is hope. There are people who are pushing forward.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I mentioned a few of the amazing advocates and providers in this space who are educating all of us online. They're advocating in policy, and we have to join them and be in community with them to make change.
I've said this before on the podcast, but whenever this conversation comes up, I think about how I went to the doctor once, and this person is no longer my doctor. And I mentioned something about menopause and perimenopause. And their response to me, it was, I think the internet is blowing this whole menopause thing out of proportion. Again, no longer my doctor. But that's something that I wish that I had had your book to literally bring with me into the doctor's office, because you talk about how to navigate those conversations, how to advocate for yourself, and also, which this is part of what I love about you being a millennial, writing a book for millennials, for our generation. Like, you talk about not just here are all of the symptoms of perimenopause, and you talk about how menopause is a retroactive diagnosis. But can you talk about some of those like early symptoms that people report having that might be like, okay, it's time to talk to my doctor about things?
Yes, I would love to. And to your last point, too many of us are not talking to our doctors because we are gaslighting ourselves. So Many people would associate hot flashes or night sweats with menopause. That's sort of the hallmark. It is a common symptom. It does happen to most women going through menopause, not every woman. But even before that, and also very common, are symptoms that we too frequently brush off. So those can include changes in mood, changes in sleep, the inability to fall asleep, the inability to stay asleep. We also see very often changes in period, but that can also be due to a variety of things: low libido, brain fog, and forgetfulness. And frankly, all my 40-something-year-old friends, when I told them that the common symptoms included low libido, fatigue, irritability, everyone's like, well, yeah, we're all like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can be, and it can be due to stress, but it can also be due to hormonal fluctuations. And so we should speak up to our providers and inquire, tell me more, right? When you said that to your doctor, at the very least, your provider should have said, tell me why you're asking. What's going on with you? How can I help you? Because it's not getting blown out of proportion on the internet. It's very real, and we all deserve, at the very least, information.
Yeah, I want to double click into when you said, oh, yeah, that's just how all of us are. That's just us. That can, like you said, like we're gaslighting ourselves into thinking that this is just a normal thing. But something that you really drive home is just because a lot of people are experiencing it, that doesn't mean that it's normal.
Yeah.
And also, at the same time, perimenopause is normal, and it might usher you into a new normal, but it's like, how do you toe the line between what, I guess this is a big question, what is normal and what isn't? I am guessing that starts earlier when it comes to just really tapping into knowing your body, and to your specialty, knowing your mental health.
Exactly. So whether it's because you have a toxic boss, or the news is really depressing, or because your hormones are wild, you don't need to sit there and suffer through it and just tell yourself that this is midlife. You deserve support in whatever way feels good to you. Maybe that is in the form of medication like hormone therapy, or mental health medication like antidepressants. And I really want women to know that, yes, something can be quote unquote normal and common, and normal in a way that, oh, you're not a weirdo for experiencing it. But that doesn't mean it has to be your new normal if it's bothering you. If something is different and it doesn't feel good, you can do something about it.
Yeah. And it makes me think of, the conversation around like burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And burnout can be talked about in these sort of binaries of, well, just give yourself a break, just take a vacation. It's like, not everybody can do that, first of all. And also, I imagine that as we are entering into sort of this new chapter of our lives, there's intersections between what's burnout because of your job and what's burnout because of your hormones and because of perimenopause. When it comes to the clients that you work with, especially because you do focus on the mental health aspects of things, and that's why I was so excited to talk to you about this, how do you help people sort of figure out what's what and what might be going on?
So I really do focus on the symptoms, not necessarily the diagnosis, even though as a social worker, I can diagnose. But my job, as I view it, is to support my clients in the ways that they need. And sometimes that means referring to a different provider, whether it's a hormone specialist or a sleep specialist or a psychiatrist. I really take pride and pleasure in connecting them to other team members who can help them. And it also can mean showing up for them in that moment and being an objective person to listen to their struggles, to help them come up with strategies to cope or communicate more effectively, and also to very much shift their interpretation of others' behaviors and reactions, and of course, their self-talk, which I know is very important to you. So when it comes to discerning what's what, I think it's important to learn that it could be hormones, it could be XYZ, but really, how are you feeling today and what can I help you with is the way that I approach my sessions.
I love that. And when it comes to, okay, this might be hormonal, it might be the big PM, the big perimenopause, do you find, this is generally speaking, and I know that this varies from person to person, but do you find that you are met with relief? Like, oh my gosh, this is just something happening? Or do you find that you're met with like shame or embarrassment or, oh no, I can't believe, what do I do?
So far, it has been relief. And I see,
Amazing.
yeah, it's been really cool to see it as I age, my clients age, and we're learning about this all together. And it's, again, such a privilege to be able to teach them. I see this a lot with mental health in general when I provide psychoeducation, for example, that up to 1 in 5 women experience a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. So everyone that I've said that to says, oh, okay, I'm not alone. This isn't something wrong with me. This is common and it's treatable and there are ways to get help. And I'm more hopeful just knowing that.
Yeah.
And likewise, I see that with perimenopause, that we understand there's other things at play here and help is available.
Yeah. I wanted to ask that because sometimes it can be so empowering to just hear that, oh yeah, other people, they're relieved when they find this out instead of, well, I guess the norm is to be ashamed or scared or sad. And so I guess that's how I should respond to it, right?
Yeah, and that was part of the motivation for writing the book because all these older women had said to me, I wish I had known. No one told me. I thought I was going crazy. I felt so alone. And I thought, well, I don't want my friends and clients and peers to be in this position. It's totally preventable if we just start talking about it. And I started talking and writing, and here we are.
Yeah. Let's talk about your background as a social worker and an immigration attorney and the fact that that unique lens that you're bringing into this space and sort of the unfortunately intersecting challenges that too many people might be going through when it comes to physically, mentally, emotionally entering into perimenopause, and also just how they're treated by sort of the system around us. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yes. So that's, of course, a very layered question. So I'll
Yes.
just start with, in general, when women have trauma in their past or a history of mental health struggles or negative childhood experiences or just generally negative attitudes towards aging and menopause, they are more likely to experience the symptoms more severely. So worth it to build up your support team and really be aware that you might be at higher risk because of those issues.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a lot, right? Now, that being said, unfortunately, it's not so easy to do that. It's easy for me to say that. It's not always easy to do that. We have a complicated healthcare system. We have providers who, again, are trying their best, but are given, let's say 10, 15 minutes in each insurance-backed doctor's visit. We have people who don't speak the language and who are discriminated against. We know that women of color are discriminated against in the healthcare system and are dismissed even more than the average white woman. And we've already talked about how that happens. So it can be very difficult for people without certain resources. Fortunately, increasingly, resources are becoming more available, whether it's virtual resources in terms of online support groups or telehealth platforms that do accept insurance. There are certainly providers who speak a variety of languages, etc. But it's an uphill battle, and all the more reason that I feel very privileged to use the privilege that I have to do what I can to speak up on behalf of all women.
Yeah. I'm thinking of you and I live in a big city adjacent, and there are a lot of people, especially right now, where it's like healthcare is just getting gutted and they don't necessarily have the resources in their town. And so I love that there are different sort of telehealth and different platforms that work on a sliding scale, or they take insurance that do exist. And you list a lot of resources in your book. What are some of the resources that you found that you're like, this is so cool and people need to know about this and I don't know if they do?
So many. So Alloy is one of the healthcare platforms that was started by Anne Bullenweider and her co-founder Monica. And Anne was someone I met that really sparked this interest in me. And they've created a platform that is at a very reasonable fee. People can pay monthly rate and get access to specialists who focus on women's midlife health, including menopause. Electra and MIDI are also amazing resources. They're telehealth platforms that take insurance. And then there's also communities like the Fuchsia Tent or Hot Paws Health that are building resources for women all over. They're free. You can read their blogs. You can see who they're quoting in terms of expert resources. And there truly is room for all of these amazing services and products out there because menopause affects all women. And we all need to be talking about it and working on it. So it's really cool to see this movement in healthcare and media take shape. And I hope it continues to grow.
Yeah. And I will put all of the links to those in the show notes so people have easy access to them. I also love that in the book, you have a section, I believe it's at the end of every chapter, of like how millennials can prepare. Mm-hmm. And that word prepare, that is something that was part of like what reminded me of the care and keeping of you, of like, hey, this is going to happen soon. And you're talking to people and meeting them where they are versus, hey, this is what's going to happen. And here's what to do when you get there. So when it comes to the preparation, along the same lines of that last question, as you were writing the book, doing your research, what were a couple or a handful of sort of prep, I don't mean this in a pithy way, like prep tips that like get ready with me for perimenopause, which I feel like should be a social media series that you launch. But what are some of the sort of prep tips that maybe people might be surprised to learn about, or might be just new information of, oh, I never thought about that?
Knowledge is power. So just knowing what this even is and that it can be happening to you by your late 30s, I think is a huge way to prepare for something. You don't need to study for the menopause test and learn every single angle, but you should know what to look for. You should know to learn your own self, your body, your mood, your mental health. And in terms of other ways to prepare now, we talk a lot at the culture about longevity and health span. We're talking more about it now. And that starts now, right? And we don't want to wake up in our 50s and say, oh, I really should be thinking about my bone health or my cognitive health. What we can do now are develop patterns and understand what resources are available to set ourselves up for success. So that includes developing good sleep hygiene. It includes making sure that we're seeing friends and having those social connections. It includes getting proper nutrition and having mental health support. And it really does include knowing what resources are available, whether it's through medication or lifestyle change or mental health support. And again, I know it's easier said than done for a lot of people, but there are areas in which everyone can optimize their health now so that they are healthier later and at the very least not caught off guard when menopause happens.
Are there a couple that maybe you personally have implemented that you're like, whew, so glad that I have this tool in my toolkit?
Yes. So every one of my friends listening will laugh at me when I say this, but sleep. I say that they'll laugh because I love sleep, but I am a night owl. And I tried to get better about scheduling sleep and really make it a priority to go to bed at a reasonable hour, wake up at a consistent hour, things like that, because sleep is so precious. It really is like medicine for our mental health and our physical health. And it's just can't hurt to get in a good habit now. I also started implementing strength training. That was something that I never really thought about. And it is so pivotal to our muscles, to our bone health, to our heart health. And so that's something that I've now been incorporating in my weekly routine. And also knowing the medical options available. I have so much about hormone therapy, about the connection between birth control and what we think of as hormone replacement therapy or menopausal hormone therapy. So knowing that and what options are has been really helpful for me personally.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those. As you were talking about knowing what your options are as far as like medications, hormone therapy, we're in a really interesting time right now where probably this has always existed, but it probably feels louder right now because of the internet and social media. But there's a lot of fear when it comes to medication. And even if the medication would really help things. And this is not to convince someone one way or the other, but have you ever come across someone who is sort of demonizing medication? Not to say that they go in that route, but what would you say to someone who you just want them to have as many options as possible on the table for themselves?
I emphasize the latter part of what you just said, that I want you to know your options. And I say this frequently, both in the perimenopause context and also in the mental health context. When I think someone is suffering with anxiety or depression, I give them a referral to a trusted psychiatrist. And I say, I would love for you to just get more information. You don't need to sign up for a prescription. You don't need to do anything with it, but I would love for you to have information from a trusted expert professional. Because medication, whether it's hormone therapy, an SSRI, Advil, whatever it is, it's a tool in our toolbox. Is it the only tool? Probably not, maybe not, depending on what the issue is. But I think it's worth learning about and getting accurate information. Unfortunately, when it comes to accuracy, we are seeing, as you noted, a lot of misinformation out there. We're seeing a lot of mistrust. I think millennials and particularly Gen Z, it feels, are very not trusting of the government, of traditional healthcare. And COVID illuminated a lot of that. And for me, I just go back to, I personally believe in science. That doesn't mean that everyone needs to be taking all the meds, but we should learn about it. We should learn what our options are and then make the best choice for ourselves.
Right. Make an informed decision for what is right for you. Yeah. It's the information and misinformation around medicine, it's like getting a little bit out of control. And so when people whether they're looking for advice around menopause, perimenopause in general, or they're looking for specific treatments, they're looking for options for themselves. What are some ways that you maybe personally have been helped or have helped clients?
If you're unsure about something, get a second opinion and then, or third or fourth, and then decide what feels best for you based on science-backed information. I also think that we talk in a lot of binaries, and just because you might try something, whether it's medication or different diet, for example, that doesn't mean that that's your only choice forever, right? You can try something, see how it feels, see how it goes, and then tweak it or try something else. And I think we have to be patient with ourselves when it comes to the trial and error involved in whatever treatment we're seeking.
I love that. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that I double clicked into that because as we get into the medical side of things, people can get maybe they're not scared of menopause or perimenopause, but maybe there's a fear or a shame around what you do about it. And I love that you really emphasize not just trust yourself, but gather the information, gather the data, and make the decision that is best for you yeah, exactly. And that you can change and that you can pivot. I know that we're coming up. We've got probably 10, 12 minutes, and I want to make sure that we get to the quick fire questions, which are not quick. They're like slow burn questions. And
Ready for it all.
But a couple more questions for you. we talk about the generations before us,
Mhm.
and one day we're going to be the generations that are before another set of people in there. What do you hope that future generations say about how we have or haven't paved the way?
I really hope that they say, whether it was hard, the ages above us have said to me, I felt like I was very alone. I was very overwhelmed. I thought I was going crazy. I didn't have anywhere to turn. I was ashamed. And I really want to get rid of any sense of stigma or loneliness. And it might be difficult because life can be difficult sometimes, right? Even if you have wonderful doctors or whatever it is. But I really want people to feel like they're not alone in their journeys.
I love that. What is one practical thing? So if people are walking away from this podcast, first practical thing that they can do is buy your book, which is so beautiful. And it comes out on July 15th, wherever books are sold. But besides the practical thing of getting your book or getting it in an ebook, is it on audiobook too?
Not yet.
Okay, well, coming soon. What is something that listeners can do today or this week to better understand their bodies or like prepare for what's next, even if they're not there yet?
Two things. One is just talk about it, right? And I'm very open. I'm not saying everyone needs to be screaming about their periods to the whole world. I'm not saying that, even though I will without problems. But just talk about it. Oh, I read this book about menopause. What do you think? Or I saw this TV show and I thought it was interesting that they talk about women aging. Just talk about these issues with men, whomever in your life, so that it becomes less of a taboo topic. And in terms of knowing yourself and your mood and body, I think for all kind of issues that I deal with when it comes to mental health, is just check in with yourself, and you can make it a daily practice. Some people like to do it in the form of a gratitude practice. Some people like to, I love this, they make a to-do list instead of a to-do list, and you give yourself some credit for what you've accomplished that day. And I would say if you're feeling off or you are feeling just unusual, note that. And you might also note, oh, my period's coming, or I haven't had a period in a while, or just notice patterns. And it's really important to track that. And then that's a good tool to use in terms of your medical care and also your mental health care.
I love that. Everybody go and talk to somebody about your body and about menopause and perimenopause today. It's funny, I'll talk to my husband about it. And, there's also studies around like how men's hormones change as well. And he's like, am I going through menopause? And I was like, trademark it. That's the next book coming. But, it's the normalization of that conversation is really powerful. And thank you so much
to share all the resources in the book and to have fun with it. I know that you have said very kindly that you're having fun with it, and it's very pop culture filled, and it feels like talking to a friend, and that's truly what I want for it. So I hope that I can help as many men and women, of course, as possible.
Awesome. And you have some book events coming up as well. So people definitely follow Lauren on social, subscribe to her. You have a newsletter, yeah?
Sometimes.
She has a newsletter that you'll get sometimes, but just stay in touch so that you can attend. I will be attending in September, one of your book launch events. I'm so excited.
Thank you. Yes. Come say hi. I really love connecting with women, and I've been welcomed into this community of other like-minded professionals, whether they're in medicine or media, who care about these topics. And it's such a pleasure to be doing it together.
Yeah. They say it takes a village to raise a child. We are all just children who became adults. So it's like you are a part of that village for so many people. So there are 3 questions that I ask everybody at the end of every single podcast episode. You can pause, you can take a second, think about it. The first question is, what makes you feel the most like yourself?
I feel the most like myself in 2 very different contexts. One is in a group full of women when I'm on stage or doing some sort of panel discussion and feeling the energy of the room and really being on, but really being in community with women and talking about women's issues. But likewise, I also feel very much like myself when I'm home in a messy bun with sweatpants, with the dog and, eating ice cream out of the container. So yes, I'm an extroverted introvert. I get really a big rush from being with people, but I also need that recharge. And so finding that right balance is important to me.
I love it. Okay, so this podcast, it's the Women Against Negative Talk podcast. And so naturally, the subject of positivity comes up a lot. But the way that I think about positivity is very different than maybe someone else might think about positivity. Positivity is a very specific thing for each person. And sometimes it can have actually negative connotations. But I love distilling that into sort of like the broad spectrum of what positivity can be. So what does positivity mean to you?
It means optimism and levity. I am a silly, cheesy person. I think it's super important to laugh at yourself, not take yourself so seriously, and to have fun. And I think that anything that brings you joy and makes you laugh and smile is positive.
Okay, final question. There's context here. And I know you've listened to the podcast. You're like, not feeling the fear and doing it anyway. But it's actually when the fear that you have of the situation is less than the faith that you have in yourself. So it's not just like a cute tweetable, fearless is when the fear is less than the faith, but it's an equation. So given that equation, what makes you feel fearless?
Doing things that are in line with my values, even if people will judge, and saying, I'm going to do it anyway because it feels right to me and it feels authentic and I won't regret being authentic.
Thank you so much for coming on the Wantcast today. This is going to help so many people and probably literally change the trajectory of their lives as they're growing up.
Thank you.